Good morning and welcome to Unity Spiritual Center in Spokane. My name is Reverend Jane Simmons and I'm here with Dr. Gary Simmons, and we are delighted to have you join us here this morning. Unity Spiritual Center, our mission is transforming lives, inspiring people to make a positive difference in our world. And so we want to begin our time by saying together our opening affirmation. I will speak it once and invite you wherever you are geographically to join with me in saying it. There's only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the good. Together. There is only one presence and one power active in my life, in the universe, God the good. One presence, one life, living itself through and as each one of us.
All right, so I want to just mention a couple of things about what's unfolding for us. Primarily, we've invited everyone to complete a survey, an online survey.
Is your mic's not on?
It's not on? Oh.
No.
Okay. All right, now I'm back. My phone inadvertently muted me. So we want to remind everyone that we've sent out a survey via our news updates on Wednesday, and so once again we'll send out the link for the SurveyMonkey, which is asking you to tell us your sense of when you might return once we're ready to do that. And so if you could just go ahead and fill that out, we have already about 80 folks have filled it out so far. We need another 50 or 60 to really have a complete picture. And if you have two adults in the house, if you could both take the survey individually, that would be ideal for us. If only one is taking the survey for your whole household, well then you can indicate that. But it'll be easier for us if every individual adult takes the survey, if that's feasible. If you're not able to electronically take the survey, you can also email us and we will send you a hard copy and you can fill that out and return it to us, and we'll include your responses as well.
The hard copies are already being sent to people who get our newsletter in a hard copy. So those of you who do that, you'll be receiving one in the mail. But if you are not able to access it online, please let us know so that we can get that hard copy to you. As most of you know, I am Canadian with dual citizenship here in this country. And when I moved to the United States nearly 20 years ago now, many of my friends and family expressed concern for my safety. You got to know that Canadians have a very different perspective on things that go on in this country. We're very, very aware of what's going on. My son is always telling me, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not really, Mom, if things get really bad down there, you can always be here. You always have a place here. And it's kind of one of those kidding, not kidding things. And I was thinking about that all during the time that the things that have been happening this week and earlier. I've been thinking about that and wondering why it is I don't feel fear or worry. And I've realized it's because I'm a white woman. A heterosexual, gray-haired white woman. Really, that's white privilege at its best. And I never saw it that way before. This has been new for me to get this understanding. And the only experience I have with the kind of profiling and treatment that our African American brothers and sisters have been receiving was back in the 60s when I was a teenager. And we were all hippies back then. We dressed the part, long hair and tie-dye. We drove a psychedelic van, all that. And we got pulled over and harassed a lot. Every time we set out on some kind of a journey, we'd be looking in the rearview mirror, and if we ever passed, a cop sitting there, we'd be holding our breath because typically we'd get pulled over. And I used to be so enraged at that, at how we were getting harassed by the police, and that we were getting targeted and we couldn't go anywhere, and how it just made me so angry. Well, the 60s turned into the 70s. The psychedelic van got traded in for a Volvo with car seats. The hair got cut, different dressing, things changed. But when the reason you're getting pulled over is because of the color of your skin, you don't have that luxury. You don't have a choice, that you can't change that. So my tiny little slice of outrage over being profiled, it just gives me a glimpse of life as usual for those of people of color. And in fact, I've been hearing and reading stories from countless African American people, from Neil deGrasse Tyson to Don Lemon to Keegan-Michael Key, frightening stories. And you know what? I'm really listening. I recently heard, if you're getting tired of hearing about racism, imagine how tired African Americans are living it. And in my work in the prisons, I have been appalled at the disproportionate numbers of people of color that are inside. And I see a corrupt system that is rigged, deliberately set up to work in favor of white people. George Floyd was only 2 years older than my son. And when I heard that he'd been crying for his mother as he was being murdered, I have to tell you, I broke down. I totally broke down. And I imagined, what if that was my son that I saw? What if that was my boy that I was watching a video of him being killed? What if that was my stepson, my gay stepson, with someone who's homophobic holding their knee on his neck? And I have to tell you, I realized I was being called to action. And the first step is for me to become educated. I want to learn. I want to do better. I want to become aware of how I've been complicit in upholding a system that's designed to keep people of color down. The idealistic hippie in me never went away, but now she's a mama bear, a very angry mama bear. The African American poet Audre Lorde makes a distinction between anger and hatred. And she says, hatred seeks to destroy, anger seeks to change. And that's what's happening within me. And so as Gary and I enter our final 6 months here before retiring, I find myself being called to help bring forth change that benefits all people, not just white people. And I want to invite anyone who's feeling this calling to join me as we explore this together. There are books for us to read and study as we educate ourselves. There are organizations for us to support. There are ways for us to practice putting our principles into use. It's time for new thought to become new action. One thing that's happening, can you show the slide?
Sure.
Is that Unity of Linwood is doing a free online book study and practicum on the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I've ordered the book and I've signed up. And they have 2 sessions, one for teens, one for adults. So if that's something that interests you, there will be more information on that in this week's update of how to get involved, how to get registered. But if there's one thing I've learned in the past few weeks, it's that solidarity has power. We have power. We have power to change things. Look what happened when so many of us stopped driving all the time, stayed home. All of a sudden the gas prices went down. The skies cleared. And I got a glimpse of the power that we have. Our power comes from withdrawing our consent to support a system that harms people of color. So during our meditation time today, we'll be spending 8 minutes and 46 seconds in silence in honor of George Floyd and all like him who have lost their lives. And I invite you during that time to really search your heart. See what is yours to do, how you might be part of what Joanna Macy calls the great turning. You know, is this the time when we truly move into a new paradigm of living for all of us? And so let's hold on to that thought and that question of how we can be better. And so I invite you to really connect with your heart right now. If you want to put your hand on your heart, go ahead and do that. What are you feeling? What are you noticing? Is your heart heavy? Is it open? Are you feeling willing to find a new way to be? To stand up and say no more. Search your heart and ask yourself, if that were my child or my grandchild, how would I feel now? If I had to have the talk with my son in pre-adolescence and my daughter about how to act, how to be safe, and then to worry every time he or she leaves with no guarantees that acting above the law will stop this from happening. So feel that. And as we join together in meditation, let us remember that there's only one presence. That presence is active in our lives. That as our hearts break open, we access that mighty power. Compassion and caring, a sense of what's right and what's wrong, and a willingness to stand up to what is wrong and say no. Power in solidarity. And so as we continue to just hold our hearts tenderly, feel that kindness within you rising up. And as we join together for 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence, check in and ask yourself, what is mine to do? How can I be the presence of divine love, making a difference on this planet? Is this why I'm here now? What is mine to do? Maybe my voice is the one that's needed. As we enter the silence, we allow Spirit to bring forth those answers for us. So let's take a breath and release. And know that there is only one presence and one power, that each one of us is an expression of the one, and that we are here to make a difference. And for this, we are grateful.
So we have a song now from Sean and Tawny, and it'll be here in just a moment.
Everybody wants to be a hero. We try to stake our claim to fame, but what we take adds up to zero. That's why you give that wins the game. And so we find our center and we get a little bit better. Nobody ever seems to know. The ones we help may never find us. We keep in touch by letting go. And so we find our center and we get a little bit better and we learn to trust our heart and soul. I don't need the credit, 'cause a light heart is worth its weight in gold. I'm gonna give it all away.
Oh, Jane, would you come back up here? You don't have to bring your microphone. You don't have to say anything. Yeah, I just, you know, you're such a gift. and I just want you to know that I feel so blessed to share this journey with you, and your authenticity, your heart, your love, and you're really caring about people. You are an inspiration to me, and so many others, and I just want you to know that you bring something to this experience of co-ministry that I could never do, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I'm impacted by what you just did, and it's going to affect what I do next. And I just wanted to not let what you had to share just kind of morph into a talk. I don't want to leave this energy, and I want this, what I'm going to say, not be an either or, but rather a both and.
Yeah, great.
So, thank you.
Yeah, go now.
Yes. So, I love you too. I want to begin my sharing with a remembrance. Remember the book Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach, who is the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Anyway, so I really resonate with this title, not so much Illusions, but The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. Not the Messiah part, but the idea of being reluctant. You know, so much of my life I've been reluctant insofar as what I've been called to do or invited to demonstrate in my life. And for instance, I've been a reluctant peacemaker, and you know, I've been branded in my own personal career with respect to my ministry for my work in the arena of making peace. And I even wrote a book on this subject called The Eye of the Storm. But I'm not really wanting to talk about my book so much as I'm wanting to talk about a principle that has been an intimate part of my own capacity to kind of be involved in the work that is my work to do, which is quite different than Jane, in the sense that there are dimensions to this work that call us to different aspects of activism. And so for me, I'm in the struggle to know and to value the activism that I represent is mattering as much as the activism that so many others who are given so much of their life in the pursuit of creating a world that works for everyone. So as a reluctant kind of peacemaker, or as a reluctant minister, or as a reluctant participant in this world of that's calling us into transformation, I've discovered, though, in spite of my reluctance, I'm good at some things. Like I'm good at helping to support people in their efforts to create harmony and well-being in their lives. And you know, I've spoken about an experience that I've had many years ago where I had a near-death experience, and I heard a voice, and that voice said, "Gary, you're the one to bring peace on earth." And I've talked about what do you do with a voice like that, and recognizing no one is the one all by themselves, but nonetheless to really welcome the idea that that's a role that I play, that's a role that I can play, even in the midst of having to reconcile that huge sense that I am the one. I mean, how could I be the one with such a depth of unworthiness, or a depth of sense that I'm a disappointment or I'm not enough? You know, and that's sort of what we have to reconcile when we're in this dynamic of being called to some kind of greater expression of who and what we've come here to be. We know on one level that's our God job, but we sometimes become reluctant even though that we sometimes, when we're able to rise to the call, we're able to do great things, and in spite of our reluctance. So as I look at my kind of journey through the arena of being called to be a peacemaker, and it doesn't the world need this now even more than ever? But back in the day when my book was first published, it was right around 9/11. And I can remember sitting with my previous wife, Nan, who was receiving a radiation treatment for her brain cancer. And there we watched on the TV, right there in the waiting room of the oncologist, there are the planes going into the Twin Towers. And it was a surreal experience. And in the context of my world revolved around the impending death of my spouse. And so all the things that were happening that constituted something that I should be paying attention to seemed to kind of fade away. And I discovered that in the context of working through my own feelings of loss and working towards reestablishing my own sense of self, that my role as peacemaker was something that was filling a need, because shortly after her passing, I received all kinds of invitations to speak on every 9/11 anniversary at Unity Ministries for the last, after 9/11, for 5 or 6 years after that. And thinking that I'm the guy who could talk to people about making sense of what's happening in the world, embracing conflict, creating peace. That was the subtitle of this book. But the principle is that the I, the capital personal pronoun I of the storm, implies that we are helping to co-create the storms of our life. And if we look at the metaphor for the storm, such as the hurricane, we can see that the storm doesn't happen by accident. There are certain conditions that are necessary to support the presence of the storms of our life. And in my book, I talk about those conditions, such as separation, such as misperception, such as competition when we have to compete for our needs, and defensiveness, all the things that are apparent right now with whatever is going, with all the things that are happening in our world. And yet we can find a place in the midst of all of these dynamics, the storms of our life, and in the context of this book, the question is, how am I participating in creating the elements that constitute the storms in my life? What am I doing to create more separation? What am I doing to live in the stories as opposed to deal with the present moment? What am I doing to kind of manipulate and control and having to have things be a certain way? What am I doing to push away and to have a need to be right? All the ways in which I'm in my normal default mode tends to create the storms of my life when I'm not conscious. But when it comes to us being able to reconcile what's happening in our life with our own journey of becoming conscious, waking up, we have to recognize that the very conditions that are happening in our life are somehow connected to what's going on within the psyche of our human family, within the consciousness of humanity. And we've talked about this dynamic, this consensus lie called the story of separation, and how all of our systems are rigged to favor those who are able to manage the systems, such as those who are wealthy or white or privileged. So the dynamics that we are dealing with in our life experience are often experiences that we have no control over the experiences themselves, only control over how we're being with what's happening in those experiences. And yes, we can be mindful of needing to kind of pay attention to when we are inadvertently separating from what we're having through judgments or blame, inadvertently, making our life mean that this is against us through our own perception and meaning making. We can recognize that contributes to the problem. But there are things that we experience in life that have no relationship necessarily to what's going on inside, but experiences that we're subjected to. And I'll give you one for instance. So here's a picture of me just a few days ago, having been knocked in the head with this 4x4. And that's why my hair is kind of down today, because I got 7 staples in my scalp because of that. And so this is an example of, well, I didn't create this. It just happened to me. And yes, I could rewind the whole scenario and said, well, it was me who put the 4x4 there all by itself in midair, and it was me that turned away in the midst of the wind, and then whack, it happened. But the deeper dynamic is, what am I going to do with what's happening in my life? And when we see suffering, or when we see injustice, and when we see the appearances of a world not working for most of everybody, then what are we called to do? Who are we called to be? How do we make sense of our entanglement in being in this world, but yet our essence is not of it? How do we reconcile this? How do we work through this? And my struggle is that when I have such a passionate partner that is on a mission to make this world work, and has a slice of what the effort is that she is in ownership of, I find myself, in a kind of place where I'm not knowing if I'm mattering sufficiently enough. And I have to remind myself that this work in consciousness, while it may not necessarily look the same as an activist who's out there trying to demonstrate for justice and tolerance and for all the things that live in the context of our deep values around humanity, interbeing, and interconnection. I got to tell you that when my book came out, I had nothing to do with any kind of initiative to call for peace until I had that near-death experience and was told that I was the one. And so, what do you do with an experience like that? Well, for me, 20 years ago, I decided, well, I should become a peace activist. So I joined a peace organization, and it was during the impending war in Iraq. And yet, when I attended the peace rallies, there were such angry people. And it was so difficult for me to be with other peacemakers because they were so angry. And it was an oxymoron for me not be able to comprehend how it was possible for these people to be so passionate about their work, but yet coming from this place of anger. And so I abandoned that effort to try to engage in the outer dynamic of calling for peace, and began to work with consciousness as a way of bringing forth the outer experience of healing and reconciliation. And I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but I gotta tell you that I've had experiences where I have been in the right state of mind and something in the outer began to shift into a different and better place. And Jane has even mentioned the phenomenon of me being able to enter into a room or an energy field where there is some disruption or conflict, and for the room to begin to shift energetically. And I do believe that we can work in consciousness to affect outer change, but we really have to have an internal context for understanding how that work can work and why it works. And so for me, the dynamic of recognizing that we are all involved now in a kind of, what do you call it, a great turning? The great turning. And in spiral dynamics, it's described as the momentous leap. There is a paradigm shift that is emerging. And we can, in New Thought, we would be favored to consider ourselves as a part of the transition team, which means that the two roles of the transition team is the hospice, that which is no longer working. And what we have here is an example of a world that's not working in all of the different ways in which it doesn't work. It's almost as if the events of these last 3 years have gifted us with evidence that the world no longer works. And the illusion of normal is really exposing the reality that it's all really crazy out there. There's no fixing it. You know, when I work with churches and we look at the dynamics that they're dealing with, I basically say there's no fixing all the things that are wrong with what's happening in the spiritual community. We have to evolve out of those issues, those dynamics. And so how do we evolve out of the systems that are broken? How do we evolve out of the dynamics that are so unjust and indifferent to the decency, the well-being, the essence that every human and every life form has? Well, we need to recognize that not only are we experiencing a great turning, which requires that there is this exposing of all the systems that are broken, we can't kind of blame the problems on the systems. We have to understand that it's all broken, and this is what broken looks like. So standing in the eye of the storm of all the things that are happening in our experience right now in these times, we can see in the midst, as we stand at the very center of this storm, we can see the storm is really all of the broken systems. The systems of how we are privileged, some more than others, the systems of our health care, of justice, of the banking systems, of the education systems. You just come up with a system and there's an aspect of it that is needing to be hospice. And yet at the same time, there is an aspect of our work in the transition team as being midwives to what is emerging. And the role of hospicing and midwife has a different outer demonstration depending upon who you are and what you're called to fulfill in the context of those two avenues. So when I remember that we are in a great turning and that we are in the process of leaping into a new paradigm that requires of us to hospice and midwife, then I have to have compassion and care for all of those who are unknowingly caught up in the very systems that are broken, that are on their way into decline. And I also have to have hope and be feeding the energy of those who are midwifing a new expression of what is possible. I mean, I just heard on watching TV that, you know, the human species began all black. In the very beginning, we were all black. And it's by virtue of migration and of the environment over thousands of years that our connection, the pigment within our skin has changed, that we have all the different varieties of a diversity of human species. But at our core, there's only one race, the human race. And that's the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is the human race, one humanity, oneness, inner being, interconnection. And so as we recognize that the broader principle, the way that I work with all that's going on, and including the energy that Jane brings into our relationship, is that I have to be present to it in its intensity so that I can understand what's really happening. There's nothing against us, but what is emerging is for us, but we have to intentionally awaken and bear witness to the unfolding, to the great turning. We cannot experience the great turning unconsciously. It just won't happen. Well, I didn't know how I was going to begin this talk, but I know how I'm going to end this talk. And this is how it's going to end. So I'm going to end the talk with playing a song that when I went to another church in Colorado, Columbine Unity, I was asked to come and present The Eye of the Storm right around the anniversary of one of these great events that have happened in our society today. And the music team prepared a song that they called The Eye of the Storm, and they wrote this for us, for me. And so I'd like to share it right now, and then we'll conclude our service shortly. So do watch, do experience this video. Thank you. Okay, oops, there it is. We got a new slide. See that?
We do have a new slide. Taking it to heart.
Are you on? Yeah, you are.
Am I on?
Caleb, is she on?
Am I? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
now
on.
you're on.
Yes, we have a new slide that David and Gay Ribble sent to us.
Yeah.
So thank you to you too.
Ripple.
Ribble, yeah.
Yep.
Taking it to heart. Well, you know, this whole time has been taking it to heart. And I love that that's how we take it to heart. You know, we feel the feelings and we let ourselves be affected by what's happening, and then we remember the truth. You know, we remember where our strength is, where our understanding comes from, where Spirit can guide us from. And we want to get to that place, the eye of the storm. That's where, otherwise, we're stuck in the storm. You know, I don't think taking action when you're stuck in the storm is very helpful. And so the action I want to take is one that is heart-centered and compassion-driven and Spirit-led. And that's how we do it. We get to the eye of the storm. That's the only place that we can speak from and be in it.
So,
So
all right, so let's move into our offertory. our
let's do
affirmation.
that, shall we? Let's say our offertory blessing together. I know that my giving blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give and receive. I give thanks for the abundance that is mine to share.
And of course,
So it
we
is.
want to remind everyone that we have our Zoom meet and greet immediately following our worship service. And
Please
so
join us.
we'll get ready for that. And also, I just want to thank everyone for your ongoing support. We appreciate that. A little bit behind last month, but we know that we can catch up. All right, so let's go ahead and get ready for our Zoom session. Our service is now concluded.
Indeed.
Indeed.